Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, welcome to the second session of this biodiversity course. As you recall from the previous hour session, it was concentrating on key principles in biodiversity conservation. And as you'll see, as we go through the next three presentations, a lot of these principles will be coming up and used when we look at various designs and construction and post-construction issues. So I'll give a brief little introduction about kind of why we worry about design, construction, and post-construction issues. And then for the next hour, I'll be talking about design. Probably a lot of you have either heard about it, how you can design for conserving open space and biodiversity. I'll go through some particulars in terms of what should we pay attention to if we're going to maximize functionality and making habitats more diverse and also benefiting wildlife populations. And then next Tuesday we'll be talking about phase 2 construction, and so even if you get the design right, you might have some issues during construction. And then the following Thursday will be on post-construction. So to go right to it, as you're aware, as a landscape ecologist that happens to work on wildlife in urban areas, there's a whole, when you work with subdivisions and the construction of subdivisions and master plan communities, I divide it out into 3 phases. And probably you're familiar with the design phase, and that's really about, where do you put the roads and the built areas, and if there's any conserved space, how you would put and where you would put the conserved space. So here's an example. This is an example of a small property in New Zealand where they have a conceptual plan, and typically that conceptual plan will be submitted to various city and county departments for approval. And this is based, of course, on local regulations and zoning, etc. And so given that, how can you design an area that will maximize the potential for conserving biodiversity? And I'll talk a lot about let the land speak for itself, and when you're looking to see where you're going to actually maximize biodiversity conservation. But let's say you get that right. You've met all the regulations. Maybe you've talked with the local regulators and you've got some variances to do more compact design. And you have a pretty good design. You've conserved the areas that have been identified as high-quality areas to conserve a number of different species. But then you have a whole host of contractors that are coming onto the site. So you have earthwork machines, you have various builders, depending on whether the team is a design team or the developer puts in the infrastructure and sells the lots to various construction companies. So you can imagine, there might be lots of open space conserved, but just the activity of what goes on during construction can really, and you'll see on Tuesday on the third presentation how construction, just the activity of constructing the buildings and the roads can really compromise the original design, which was to conserve biodiverse areas or conservation areas within the development itself. But let's say you got the design pretty well oriented toward conserving biodiversity. The contractors and subcontractors of earthwork machines did pretty well and had minimal impacts. But then you have kind of the third phase, and this is depending on how big the property is, you might have construction going on while people are moving into different phases within the development. And how people understand or are engaged with biodiversity conservation can promote the functionality not only within the landscaped areas and the lots and shared open spaces, but the conserved areas that are designated off limits or for biodiversity values. And so just the activities, the day-to-day activities by homeowners, and I'll give lots of examples on this in the fourth presentation, can really compromise the overall functionality of a subdivision that's trying to conserve biodiversity. And I think really, if there's any take-home message, I think design is important, but management throughout the whole process is really where the rubber meets the road. I mean, when we're talking about functional ecosystems and benefiting biodiversity, I think design is important. That's the framework, but the reality of it, when you're looking at, from my experiences and reading papers, both nationally and internationally, it's really during these construction and post-construction phases that make or break conservation development.